Hi guys, welcome back to the Overtime Heroics MMA podcast. I'm Martin Hamilton. I'm joined today by Austin and Brent Dolan. How are you doing, guys?
How's it
Doing
going?
good.
Yeah, I'm all good. So, guys, we've got a lot of action coming up this Saturday now at UFC 276. So there's so many fights on this weekend that if we were to talk about every fight, we'd be here to next Saturday, funnily enough, because it's stacked. Like that's what we were saying. You know, it's quite stacked when people like Macy Barber and Jessica Eye are on the prelims, and we'll come to the first fight that we're going to talk about. Like it's second fight on the card, early prelims. It's Brad Tavares and Duplessis. How do you see that fight going, Austin?
I see it being another fight for Duplessis, rising up. Brad Tavares is a veteran in the game. Kind of got a pretty solid name out there in the MMA world. But I think it's just Duplessis' time. I think he's going to find his range and find his shots and eventually get Brad Tavares out of there probably.
What about yourself, Brent? Do you have any conflicting views? Or
Not really, actually. I think Austin. I completely agree with Austin. Tavares is obviously no joke. He's 16-2, but where Austin hit it on the head there was it's Duplessis' time. I firmly believe that it's not going to be an easy task for Dreykus, but I definitely see him utilizing every skill that he has to make a statement here at UFC 276.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. So we'll move on a wee bit then. And one of the fights that it's very interesting. It's Jim Miller and Cowboy Cerrone. This fight came about kind of last minute as well. Cowboy Cerrone, he's tried to be booked with Joe Lozon the last couple of months, and that fight's fell apart twice now. It seems like one of those fights that was a bit jinxed. Both guys have had to pull out with illnesses. So how do you see the fight going with Jim Miller and Cowboy Cerrone?
Austin, you want to go first? Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of hard to predict just because it's so quick and sudden. But you've got two guys that have been in this game for a long time. They're both veterans. Obviously, they're both very well rounded. I'd like to see it go to the ground. Personally, I would just like to see how Cowboy would react to that because Cowboy's got a pretty slick ground game as well. But Jim Miller, especially, we know what his ground game represents. But I would have to, if I had to make a prediction, it would have to be Jim Miller. Just with all the up and down stuff Cowboy and Joe Lozon's been going through, I could see Jim Miller just kind of narrowly winning a decision.
What about yourself, Brent?
Yeah, this one's interesting. It's a treat for the old school fans. Two veterans. I mean, two guys that don't quit. Miller, he's on a 2-fight win streak. He's won his last 2. Cerrone, has been a while since he's tasted victory. Last minute, but it is worth noting that this fight is at 170. I know Cowboy was the last we heard from Cowboy after the Lozon fight was canceled was that he didn't want to do another weight cut. So I was quite surprised when this fight was announced, but here we go. I mean, saddle up. It's going to be a fun ride. And like Austin said, I would like to see this one go to the ground too, because if it does go to the ground, the transitions, the attempts, it's going to be one hell of a slick fight.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely agree. And I did really like that I seen that it was going to be at 170 and it wasn't going to be at 155 because that was a big worry for me coming in, particularly like around Cowboy, like cutting weight so much so soon isn't amazing for you, and it's definitely not great for your brain, especially if you're someone like Cowboy that's had so many fights as well. Like we've seen that in Cowboy's later career, that this like a kind of cumulative damage has started to take its toll a wee bit. So when I seen that he was fighting again, like so soon after he's like tried to make weight twice in the last couple of months, it did kind of worry me, and I thought that would play a big factor. just with his ability to take a shot, how he'd look in there. Because this was to a more extreme example. This is something we seen last year with Chris Duncan when he competed in the Contender Series. He was more extreme. Like he tried to make weight 3 times in 3 weeks or something like that. And you've seen the huge impact it had on his performance on the night and his ability to take a shot. So that was a huge factor in my mindset with this fight with Cowboy. But even saying that, like, I don't see past Jim Miller at the moment. Like, as you are saying, Jim Miller's in a 2-fight win streak, won them both via stoppage, via KO, TKO. I see that happening again, and I don't want to see Cowboy knocked out. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, Cowboy, he's a legend of the sport. So is Jim Miller, which makes this fight so exciting, and it made the Joe Lozon fight so exciting as well. Like, 2 legends. Like, you don't want to see Donald Cerrone fight young up and comers. You don't want to see like Donald Cerrone fight someone like Gamrot or Frizev or Drew Dober. You don't want to see him fighting those types of guys, like guys that are really in the up and coming. You want to see legend versus legend, and this is one of those fights, and it's very exciting for the UFC. It's a fight that can go either way. Like, I'm like, Cowboy can win, but I just don't see past Jim Miller at the moment. I just think Jim Miller will get the win via TKO. So we'll move on quickly because some on this card, it's got one of the very exciting young Irish fighters coming through at the moment. A young guy called Ian Garry. He's facing off against Gabe Green, someone else very young in his UFC career as well. I think Gabe Green's only had 2 fights in the UFC, so it's a very well matched fight in that regard, like experience wise. How do you see the fight going, Brent?
This one is another interesting one. I mean, like you said off the bat, this card is just stacked with intense matchups, important matchups. Like, this one's almost a pick 'em when you look at the odds. If I'm forced to pick somebody, I can't pick against Ian Garry at this point, and I certainly don't see him walking over Gabe Green by any means, but I can see him certainly get his hand raised, possibly even drag it out 3-round decision.
What about yourself, Austin?
Yeah, I see it probably going to decision. You know, we've seen with Ian Garry, he's had some holes exposed. He gets hit quite a bit, and he doesn't mind taking damage. But as we know in this sport, you know, you can't do that forever because it'll add up eventually. But yeah, I see Ian Garry winning a decision. And like Brent said, you know, at this point, I just can't pick against him. You know, maybe Gabe Green shows something, maybe a bigger hole, or exposes the already known holes of Ian Garry. And, you know, maybe later down the line when he faces stiffer competition, that's when the time comes to pick against him. But right now, I just can't pick against Ian Garry. I'm all in for the young guys on this card, really, you know, taking that next step.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think with Ian Garry, it's almost it feels like we're watching the rise of Conor McGregor again. And I know that sounds ridiculous because the guys are both Irish, and I don't like it when fighters are often compared to guys for their home country. Like, this person is going to be the next. But I'm not really saying that. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Conor McGregor. I'm saying it's just got that kind of feel about it. Like, he's got that aura of invincibility. Like, as you said, you're seeing holes in his game, but you're not backing against that because the guy oozes confidence. And what's most important about him is it seems natural. Let's see when he talks after fights, it doesn't seem scripted. It doesn't seem staged. He's natural and he's funny. So he's got all the same kind of characteristics, and it builds into the whole mystique of the performance as well. Like, you can watch them and they don't look amazing, but they ooze that bit of confidence after the fight, and you buy into it, and it just breeds and breeds and breeds. It's a great matchup from the UFC as well. And I think the UFC will want Ian Garry to win because I think they'll look at Ian Garry as a next cash cow. But the UFC are very good, even with their cash cows, that they match them with difficult matchups. And Gabe Green is a very difficult matchup. He is someone that can stop you. He can stop you with his hands. He's got great boxing. He comes into the range very well. Like Ian Gary, like he's quite long for the division as well. So I always wonder if that will be a factor and if you'll be able to keep him at range. But it is such a well matched fight from the UFC, and that's what this is kind of been the theme as we've been talking, is how stacked the UFC is at the moment. Like what other promotion would you see Duplessis and Tavares as a second fight on the card? Like right. You wouldn't. The UFC is in an amazing position right now, and they match their fighters so well with people of like very the same talent. And I think this fight, it could be a coming out party for either guy. And I just see it going to this. I see it going to Ian Gary in the decision as well. So we'll move on from Ian Gary a wee bit and Gabe Green, and we'll talk about another legend, because this card also seems to be kind of stacked with legends, which I absolutely love. But it's Robbie Lawler against Bam Bam Barberena. How do you guys see that fight going?
This is another one. These are tough matchups to pick. I mean, the odds have this near even. But that being said, if I'm picking somebody in this one, I'm going to put my money on Barberena at this point of Lawler's career. He's a legend. I can't express how much respect I have for Robbie Lawler and what he's done in his career, but we all know he's on the downslide. He's 40 years old. He's still trying to fight elite competition. I mean, he is coming off of a win, but before that, he had four or five losses in a row. I just don't see him getting past Barberena at this point. So my money's on Barberena. What about you, Austin?
I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to go with Robbie, just based on the fact that I think Robbie gained a little bit of confidence after the Nick Diaz fight. He didn't particularly look great against Nick Diaz. He had his moments, and Brian's a tough out in there. He's very tenacious. He likes to pressure. He likes to throw and get in the pocket and just swing. And if we see the Robbie Lawler that faced Colby Covington, that just let himself be backed up and pushed against the fence, then he's not going to win. I don't think he'll get finished, but, he's just not going to win in a decision. But I'm hoping, and I think that Robbie might have gained some confidence just finally getting a win and kind of getting that demon off of his back of not having won a fight in quite a while. But I think it's going to come down to if Barberena can really pressure him and push him back, because I think Robbie's at the point now he just goes in there to do it. If some guys really, and I hate to say this because we all know Robbie as a very willful fighter and has a lot of heart and a lot of grit, and you can't make him quit. But I think he's at the point now in his career that if he goes in there against another young guy and that young guy's really wanting to make a statement, that Robbie's just going to let him. So, but I'm still going to pick Robbie just based off of I'm hoping that he's got confidence from his last win.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point you make about how the confidence can impact a fighter's performance, and I do hope that Robbie Lawler, the old Robbie Lawler, that absolute beast, comes back. But I don't see it. Like he's now hit 40, and I don't like the matchup from the UFC. I know I was just praising the UFC for their great matchups, but I really don't like this one. I don't see what Robbie Lawler gains if he beats Barberena. Like where does he go next? Sort of idea. It doesn't really build his legacy. It won't push him up rankings or anything like that. Like I'm struggling to see the kind of the goal here for Robbie Lawler with this, because he's not going to have another run at the title. I think we can all kind of agree on that. I know he'll probably say different in his head, and I completely respect that. Like he's an elite athlete at the end of the day, and that's where his mindset needs to be. But I think we need a term of realism, and I think there could be a lot better matchups for him out there than Barberena. Like Barberena is an absolute animal. Like his last fight with Matt Brown, Like his fight with Matt Brown was amazing. Like it was a great striking performance for both guys. Like Matt Brown got him, and that was the very interesting thing about the fight. Like Matt Brown got him to the ground a bit as well, because Matt Brown's utilised the tie sweeps very well. So I wonder if Robbie Lawler will look at that and see if he can try and implement his wrestling and try and get a grind game going on. But I think if he looks to stand with Barberena, I can see Barberena getting the finish. When I seen it announced, it didn't fill me with confidence like going forward. It was a kind of, what the fuck is that? Like surely there could have been, like the Nick Diaz fight made loads of sense. Like, so getting that kind of win back off Nick Diaz, like Nick Diaz had beat him previously, like getting that win back, and Nick Diaz is a huge name. Like that looks amazing on your record. You're just looking at Barberena and going, does that add the same weight? Like Barberena is a world class fighter. He's really good. I think he's actually quite underrated. But it's all about that kind of name value at this stage of Robbie Lawler's career, or it should be, in my opinion.
If I can add, and I know I just credited Barberena for his tenaciousness, and he likes to really get in those brawls. That can kind of work against him sometimes, because we've seen in Barberena fights, he'll do some things that are just questionable. It's like you had him backpedaling, and then you went for like some crazy spinning back fist or something that got you nowhere or something, So he can get himself into trouble. So, and it all depends if Robbie wants to capitalize on moments like that, because Barberena is a strong starter, but as the fight progresses and it gets to the deeper waters, he tends to really try to pull out new things,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think when you're fighting Robbie Lawler, like, you always kind of need to be on your A game as well. Like, if I was Barberena, I'd be watching old Robbie Lawler highlights. Like, do you know, like Brendan Schaub said that when he fought Miko Krokop. He watched all Miko Krokop's highlights before he went out there. And like, obviously, you shouldn't be doing that, because he isn't Miko Krokop, like right leg hospital, left leg cemetery. Like you should. But he said that got him so amped up for the fight, and it'd be quite interesting to see if Barberena would take a similar approach, because like the old Robbie Lawler was an absolute savage. Like his strike, like he was a really good wrestling background, but his striking was so elite. Like he had so much power in his hands. But we'll move away a wee bit, because we do have so much to talk about. And this fight at the moment, it's the featured prelim, and it's a fight I absolutely love. It's Brad Riddell versus Jallian Turner, and I don't mind taking the lead on this fight. It's, when you look at it, like name value wise, you're like, oh, Brad Riddell's going to walk all over him, but I don't think that's the case, because Jallian Turner, I think he's tied second for the longest stoppage streak in the UFC at the moment. I think the only ones that have he's got four stoppages in a row. I think the only ones that have got more than him is Tai Tuivasa and Tom Aspinall. It's the two heavyweights. He's tied with like Paul Craig and stuff like that. I was seeing Paul Craig had shared that on his Instagram earlier. So he's earned this fight. He's earned this fight with Brad Riddell. And Brad Riddell he'd an up and down 2021. Like, he had a great fight. Sorry. He had a great fight with Drew Dober early on in the year. That was so back and forward. I think they both dropped each other early, and the fight kind of went, like, in the opening rounds. You seen it going to Drew Dober. Like, but then Brad Riddell's an absolute dog. Like, you just need to look at the guys that Brad Riddell trains with, like, every day. He trains with the like Isreal Adesanya, trains with the likes of Volkanovski. Like, he trains with such high level guys over at City Kickboxing. That's only some of the guys that are in the UFC. Like, they've got absolute killers in every capacity. Like, their kickboxing team is so elite. So it's such an interesting fight, and it's one of the ones that Jallian Turner has earned. Like, getting four stoppages in a row in the UFC at any level is so impressive. Like, it doesn't happen for a reason, because the guys in the UFC are so high level. It only takes one slip, it only takes one mistake for the fight to go the other way. So to have four wins in a row, like, against good opposition, it shows the level of performance that he's been at, and it will provide him, like, as you were saying earlier, Austin, that level of confidence as well. Get into this fight. Like, don't get me wrong, I see Brad Riddell winning the fight. I see his striking and the way he mixes striking and with grappling. I see that maybe being a bit too much because he has fought like the higher level guys. Like losing against Friziev, I've probably butchered that. Like that is there's no shame in losing to Friziev. That guy is, let's face it, he is one of the top guys in the lightweight division. He's been very unlucky with injuries and stuff like that, which has stopped him fighting recently. But he is on that trajectory that he'll be fighting for a title soon, in my opinion. So losing to him, it's not really, that's a learning curve for Brad Riddell, and I hope he comes back stronger from that loss and comes into this fight with the best version of Brad Riddell we've seen, and he can get the win. What do you think, Brent?
This one's another one I feel like a broken record here. Near even odds. It's a huge huge test for Jalen Turner. Obviously Brad Riddell's no joke. Neither man is a joke. I mean, you talk about mixing a ground game with stand up, and Jalen Turner's got submission. You talk about his 4-fight win streak that includes finishes in each. He's got submissions. He's got knockouts, ground and pound. This one's a tough one for me because I absolutely love Riddell, but I'm picking Jalen Turner here, and I think he's going to be able to finish the fight.
Yeah, I could definitely see Jalen Turner, catching Brad Riddell with something, but I'm going to go with Martin on this one. I'm going to pick Brad Riddell. I just think if he can mix up, like you alluded to, his striking and grappling, he can really dictate the pace and where the fight goes. And I see him eking out a decision win, but it's a very tough fight, and it's a very good fight for both guys. And whoever wins, there's no shame in the loser who lost, because both guys are very tough. Like we see Jalen Turner, he's on this trajectory up, going up, and Brad Riddell's still, right there in the middle of the lightweight division, the top 15. So, yeah, I just think it's going to be a very good fight, very good technical display.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. One of the things that was swaying me to Brad Riddell as well is how good, like Jalen Turner. He is a big guy, and he's got long limbs. I think he's got like a 5 or 6 inch reach advantage over Brad Riddell, which is big. But Brad Riddell's used to that in training. He's used to that. He's used to these long, lanky guys. He's used to training with guys like Isreal Adesanya. Like, and that was just kind of swaying me as well with how much Jalen Turner likes to use the range to his advantage, because not a lot of guys get that kind of input, but just seeing that the people that Brad Riddell trains with on a regular basis, that was swaying me a bit more as well, because it's nothing that he hasn't seen before. It's not like he's never seen a long rangey guy. Like, do you know what I mean? He trains with the best long rangey guy, perhaps in mixed martial arts. So that kind of thing as well. Like, a lot of the time, fights are won in the practice room. Fights are won with the guys that you share the cage with or share the mat with on a daily basis. Like, just getting these kind of reads and practice can make the whole difference in a fight. But we'll try and move on from this as well. And this is a very exciting fight for me, because it could be a coming out party, or it could for either guy. So it's Pedro Munhoz against Suga Sean O'Malley. How do you guys see this fight going?
This one is this one's huge for me. This is tough. Another tough one for me. We've got Suga Sean as a moderate favorite going into this one, probably rightfully so. I don't know. At this point, since that Chito Vera loss, Sean O'Malley has looked incredible, with maybe the Chris Montano fight aside. Not that he didn't look good in that one. I just thought he could have looked better. But of course, that was a short notice as well. Pedro Munhoz, 2-fight losing streak. But 2-fight losing streak we're talking about elite opponents here. Jose Aldo and Dominic Cruz are his last 2 fights, where he lost both via decision. So it's not like he went out there and got his ass kicked. At this point, though, I don't know. This is a huge, as you say, it could be a coming out party if O'Malley comes out here and walks through his opponent like he has his last couple, which I don't think he's going to. I mean, Munhoz, I don't see him getting put away that easy. But if he does, I mean, this is a huge statement. He has the ability to make a huge statement here. But can he do it against the tough Pedro Munhoz, who's absolutely no fucking joke? I don't know. If I'm forced to pick somebody in this one, I've got to go with the favorite here. I think the Suga Sean O'Malley train keeps rolling, and he's going to keep on climbing that ranks. What do you think in this one there, Austin?
Well, I think, it's really important to note that Pedro's never been finished, ever. And you see some of the guys he's fought absolute killers in there, and he's never been stopped, not submitted, not knocked out, nothing. And on the flip side, with Sean O'Malley, he's very susceptible to leg kicks, as Chito Vera pointed out, and Pedro Munhoz throws some nasty leg kicks and some calf kicks in there. So they've both got weapons that they can utilize. I think as far as the boxing and the stand-up game goes, I would give Sean O'Malley the edge. But Pedro Munhoz, he's got power in there, and he's sneaky. He could, if Sean O'Malley's too confident, he could easily get into something. If he doesn't check the kicks, it could wear on him and eventually put him down. Oh, man, it's tough. O'Malley's more accurate, and he has more volume. So I'm going to go with O'Malley by decision. I don't think he finishes Pedro Munhoz, but I think he probably wins, 2 rounds pretty decisively and just gets a unanimous decision victory. Still a good win for his cap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of on the same field as you guys, that this is such a pick'em fight, sort of idea. It's all about, for me, it's who can implement their game plan first. I think Pedro Munhoz needs to have Sean O'Malley in the back foot. He can't have Sean O'Malley getting any rhythm. That's when Sean O'Malley looks at his best. Sean O'Malley looks at his best when he's using his length, because again, it comes back to that long kind of rangy style. I think he's got 7 inches. I wrote that down earlier. He's got a 7-inch reach over Pedro Munhoz. So Pedro Munhoz needs to have him going back. He can't have Sean O'Malley walking forward, getting into a rhythm, using his shots, getting creative, because Sean O'Malley is a very creative striker. He's very creative with his hands. And when he's in a rhythm, it's very hard to upset that rhythm. I think the only person we've seen do it is Chito Vera, but Chito Vera upset the rhythm with those kicks. So the kicks, again, it's that huge part. That should be the huge part of Pedro Munhoz's game plan. But Pedro Munhoz needs to be careful that he disguises the kicks well, and how he sets them up, which could be a challenge with that 7-inch, because a lot of time you need to set up the checks with your hands. But Pedro Munhoz is good at he's good at getting in and out of the pocket, getting in and out of range. So he needs to do that very well. He needs to be the forward pressure fighter, looking to back O'Malley up, make O'Malley tired as well. Because there's also been questions of O'Malley's gas tank in the past. So look to wear on him, look to use the clinch, look to maybe look to take him down. But as I say that, look to take him down, this could be where we finally really see Sean O'Malley's ground game, because we hear great things from his coach and the people he trains with, that his ground game's hugely sorry again, his ground game's hugely underappreciated. And like you said earlier, Austin, we have seen Sean O'Malley susceptible to leg kicks. We also seen it in one of his earlier fights. I want to say it was Terry and Weir, where he physically couldn't stand at the end of the fight, and had to, and that might have been his first fight in the UFC. It was his first or second fight in the UFC, but it was the 3rd round, and he physically couldn't stand, so laying his back, and the guy went down with him, and just had top control for the whole fight, when all he had to do was stand up and take a step back, and Sean O'Malley couldn't stand, because we've seen Sean O'Malley stretchered out of the octagon twice in his UFC career. You don't really see that a lot. So if Pedro Munhoz can upset the rhythm, if he can utilise his leg kicks, I think it could be a hard fight for Sean O'Malley. But I kind of wish this was 5 rounds. I kind of wish this was a US. I know Sean O'Malley's one of the big names. Like, he's got a huge Instagram following. I think he's got 2 million followers. So he's one of the big names of the UFC, especially over in America. So they want him on their pay-per-views, and I completely understand that. But from a fan's point of view, I would have loved to have seen this as like a fight night main event, 5 rounds somewhere, where you could have really have seen all the different aspects really play out over the 5 rounds to see where Sean O'Malley goes. But I'm going to throw this question back at you. Like, if Sean O'Malley wins, who do you want to see next from him? Who do you want to see him fight next if Sean O'Malley wins?
I'll go first. Petr Yan. If he beats Pedro Munhoz, there's no one worthy of, and I don't think Sean O'Malley's worthy of fighting Petr Yan, who's coming off of a title loss. But it's the fact that there's really nobody else in that division right now that's worthy of it, and they've got beef. They're trying to strap this rocket ship to Sean O'Malley, and if he beats Pedro Munhoz and does it pretty decisively, I mean, you can. It's a kind of a hard sell, but you can sell it where he deserves a fight against Petr Yan.
I like that. I really do.
Yeah, no, I like that too. A couple of other options that kind of went through my mind. I mean, I'm just talking fantasy world here, but 2 matchups that I would love to see is O'Malley versus Cruz, which is not ever going to happen, I don't think. I just stylistically, I would love to see how that plays out. The other one that I was thinking was O'Malley and Dillashaw. Something, again, highly unlikely to happen in his next fight, but stylistically, I just think that would be so much fun for the fans, and it would be it would be huge. I mean, either one of those. But I do like the Petr Yan. There's so many options at bantamweight right now. There's so many exciting fights to make. If I had to pick one that I would like to see, I got to go Dominic Cruz.
I don't think that fight's actually far away, Brent, and that's kind of half of what I was going to say, to be honest, because I was going to say I think Sean O'Malley should look to fight the winner of Cheeto versus Cruz. I know if Cheeto wins, that's a very hard sell on Cheeto's part, because for Cheeto, he's already beat him, and Sean O'Malley's like quite a bit below him in the rankings, so Cheeto wouldn't really move up in the rankings sort of idea, but I just feel that the UFC would be able to bait him into it. They're brilliant at doing that. Like, there's no reason that loads of guys want to fight other guys, but the UFC are great at baiting you into getting matchups that the fans want to see, and that is a huge matchup that fans want to see. There's question marks over Cheeto's victory, which I think is ridiculous. I think it was ridiculous that people. I love that Sean O'Malley was saying that he's still undefeated. I like that. It's funny. It's corny. I get it. But there was a lot of fans that genuinely weren't giving Vera the win. They were making out as if it was some kind of, I don't know, like accidental eye poke or a clash of heads. It wasn't. It was a utilisation of a great technique. So it was very confusing. Like, for the fans' perspective, so I would love to see that fight or the Dominic Cruz fight, because as Brent was touching on, like, that's just a striker's like kind of ideal matchup. Like, I don't know if Dominic Cruz would go for it again. It's that whole risk versus reward, but that would be my planning for Sean O'Malley after that, the winner of that fight, because that fight's only next month as well. It's early August, so they aren't too far apart. So you could be able to petition it for maybe the end of the year, the start of next year, and that would seem to work for both guys.
If I could if I could piggyback off that with Cheeto Vera, like you were saying, they could bait him. All they got to do is say, hey, silence everybody. This is your chance to silence everybody. Some people think it's a fluke that you beat Sean O'Malley. So this is your chance. You've proved you're a top guy, but Sean O'Malley, if he beats Pedro Munhoz, proves he's a top guy. And this is your chance to really go out there and put your stamp on it and say, hey, I'm better than you. I'm more worthy of getting towards a title shot than you are. There's no doubt that that fight is down the road. Yeah. Maybe if it's not the next fight, it'll be the fight after or the fight after that. They're going to meet again, and it's going to be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that fight is got to happen. Like, it's one of the ones that everyone wants to see it. It seems that both guys want to see it. Sean O'Malley wants to get that win back. Chito Vera will want to shut O'Malley up because O'Malley was quite insufferable after it. It was really funny. Like the way he went on, it was so funny. Like it was like the old way the WWE stars used to do. Like they completely no sold it. Like he no sold the win. But we'll move on. We'll move on, and this is again like a striker's ideal fight. This Sean Strickland versus Pereira. How do you see that fight going, Austin?
There's two ways the fight can go, and it's either Pereira catches him, just coming in, or Strickland makes it dirty. And I think Strickland has keys to winning this fight. And he's just got to utilize his whole tool bag. He's got to make it dirty. He's got to pressure Pereira. He's got to get him up against the fence. And I think if he can take down Pereira early in the fight, especially in the first round, and not really have to do anything with it, as long as he can just make Pereira work and make him expel some of his gas that he would be reserving for the later rounds. If he can just get him down and make him grind and make him work, he doesn't necessarily have to win the first round, but if he can tire him out enough, that's when his options of pressuring Pereira become more readily available and not as risky as it would be. If he can't make it dirty, if he can't make Pereira work and grind, then Pereira's just going to pick him apart at range, and he's going to find his shots. Because Strickland's known as a good defensive guy, and he is, but I think the problem is who has Strickland really fought that's a striker the level of Pereira. He's fought Uriah Hall, but Uriah Hall at this point, when he fought him, he's not what Pereira is. He's not what Isreal Adesanya is or Robert Whittaker. I'm going to go with Pereira. I just think he'll find something in that fight. And, I'm anxious to see because Pereira has been boasting the last couple of weeks about how he's got a slick ground game that's, he's ready to show off, and he wants this fight to go to decision. I don't know. I just see Pereira landing a knockout at some point in the fight.
Nice. Yeah, this is another one. Near even. Both on a hell of a tear. I don't even know what their win streaks are. 5 minimum. I'm gonna just touch on that, on what Austin said a little bit too about Strickland having to make it dirty. He's got to lean on him. He's got to make Pereira tired. And Pereira with the reach advantage, there's no way Strickland can stay on the outside and survive. Not with Pereira's reach advantage, and not with his striking ability. Now his ground game, Alex, is questionable at this point. We don't know enough about it. I mean, the guy's only 5-1, and he's already up here fighting the best in the world. That being said, Strickland's a different kind of animal. I've never witnessed anybody like him. And the scary thing is people that actually know him and the guys that actually train with him. The shit that he does on social media, that's not an act. This guy is fucking crazy. And that's a dangerous thing inside the octagon, when you don't give a shit and you're batshit crazy. I don't necessarily like Strickland's style as of late. As a fan, it hasn't been very fan friendly when he talks all this shit and then he goes in there and doesn't actually do much. But this one, I think he's got the brains enough to know what he has to do. And I think he's gonna smother Pereira. The first round is going to be all telling, though. It's going to be a crazy ass first round. If he can get through that storm, I think he's got a very good chance of eking out the decision victory here.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you made about Sean Strickland. Like he does have a very intelligent fighting style at times. Like I know he comes across as a bit of the class clown on Twitter, and a lot of the things he says on social media gives the perception that he's not an intelligent guy, but he really is, and his fighting style really showcases that. Like his fight against Uriah Hall, he done great. As I said, I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about one of the other fights, he was able to upset Uriah Hall's rhythm a lot. Like he was always first, and he doesn't just throw one punch; he'll throw twos and threes. His volume and his forward pressure is really difficult to kind of get a gauge on. But that's great when you're up against guys like Uriah Hall who have that very traditional kind of karate style. I think when you're up against someone like when you're up against someone like Alex Pereira, it's a different mindset. It's a different ball game. And I notice at times that Sean Strickland, once he carries out a combination, he drops his hands a wee bit low, and that's very common in MMA to defend takedowns. But I think when you're up against someone like Alex Pereira, who's a very good counter striker and has got a great check hook, that's very dangerous. And he's sometimes very heavy on his lead leg, and that can be very important into the fight as well, with how he can defend kicks. So it's all about, as you were saying, is like the first round's so important. And I know like Sean Strickland does like to strike, but I think he should look to grapple. He should look to grapple Pereira and see how raw he is in that regard. But it's also important to be mindful as well. Like, if you're going to look to take someone like Pereira down, you need to be fully committed to it, because there's that chance that he's going to throw that lead knee up and you're going to eat a big knee as you're coming in and take that takedown. So you need to be fully on board with that. That's a possibility that he can land that kind of flying knee. We've seen him do it in the UFC already. He can land that flying knee as you're coming in. Like Jose Masvidal done in Ben Askren. Obviously, Ben Askren is a completely different stylistic matchup. I know that, but that is a good example of it being utilised, sort of thing. So if Alex Pereira can look to do something like that, like throw a short knee up if he comes in the takedown, it could change the trajectory of the fight. I'm always very interested to see how your classic kickboxers cope with the 4 ounce gloves, because it makes a huge difference in how they can defend themselves. And we've seen that. We've seen it a lot with Biggie Boy, Jorginho Rosenstrike. I know it's heavyweight, so it's a bit different up there because they all hit really hard. But it was the same when Gokhan Saki came over from. He was another guy who came over from Gory as well. Like he was knocked out quite a bit. Like the 4 ounce gloves, it makes a huge difference to striking and how you utilise your head movement. But I'm not overly concerned with someone like Alex Pereira. He kind of gives me the Yuri Pekranska vibes without being as much of a fucking madman as Yuri. And we've seen that. We've seen how like the strikers coming over are adapting to the 4 ounce gloves. We see it over in one as well, that they're starting to have like Thai fights in 4 ounce gloves, which is really cool. I just really want this fight to go in the way of Pereira, because I want to see how him and Isreal Adesanya go in 4 ounce gloves. It's a fight everyone wants to see. So I'm going to go Pereira versus with knockout in the second round. Is there anything else anyone wants to add to that fight, or do you just want to move on?
I've got one more thing. Like, we all know what they're doing here. The UFC knows what they're doing. Sean Strickland knows what they're doing. Alex Pereira knows what they're doing. So, like, I'm very anxious if Sean Strickland was to win. How does he act after, because he knows what the UFC is trying to do to him. He's like, they're trying to serve me up as a sacrificial lamb so they can go ahead and get this guy a title shot against Isreal Adesanya, even though I'm riding this huge win fight streak, So it'd be very interesting if Strickland was to win, how he acts on social media afterwards.
I can answer that for you. He will be fucking unbearable, and I would love to see it. I couldn't. If he wins, I cannot wait for the social media storm. I can't wait for the post-fight press and the post-fight interview. Some of the stuff he'll come out with will be absolutely insane. Because it's like you're saying that he has been set up to be this sacrificial lamb, but I think Sean Strickland doesn't mind. I don't think he minds playing that role, the role of like the sideshow or the underdog. I don't think he cares. But I think he just sees this, that he's going to come in and he's going to get the win against this man, and he's going to look for bigger and better things after this. So it's very strategic where the fight's placed. It's placed in the same card as Jarred as well. So it's playing the narrative that if Pereira wins, he's gone straight to that title shot. So it's very interesting, and I can't wait either way, because it's either going to end up with potentially the fight we all want to see, or Sean Strickland going on an absolute tear in social media. I don't know what one would be better. But we'll move on, because I'm very cautious of time. And we'll move on to a fight that I think is MMA fans. Some people are starting to get a bit bored of it now, because it seems that we watch this fight every couple of weeks. But it's such a fun fight. And they're the two best guys at featherweight in the world, so it makes sense that the fight happens all the time. But it's Max Holloway against Alexander the Great Volkanovski. How do you see that fight going, Brent?
I think it's going to be just as insane as the first two. I don't know. Like, if you're a fight fan and you know the first two fights, there's not a lot to say here. I mean, obviously there was people that thought Max won. Yeah, this fight is so close. I mean, you got two of the best featherweights in the world. Max Holloway has been a staple for what seems like forever. Volkanovski's been on a tear since he entered the division. This one's going to be exciting. It's going to be fucking fun. And I'm going to touch on what you said, Martin, there a little bit too. I'm hoping it puts a stamp on Volkanovski versus Holloway. On one hand, it's great because they are the two best in the world, and that's usually what we want to see from the UFC is top tier fighter against top tier fighter. But it's like Groundhog Day, right? So I'm hoping that this maybe, if Volkanovski gets past Holloway again, there's no way they can book it again. I wouldn't think. If Holloway manages to do it here, he's got to do it he's got to stop Volkanovski, as far as I'm concerned. The first two fights, maybe I can't remember which fight was more controversial. I want to say the second, maybe. Was proof that you can't leave it to the judges. These past how many weeks in a row have we had controversial scorecards turned in? The only way I see Max Holloway winning this fight is by finishing Volkanovski, and flipping the coin to that is I don't see that happening. I can't pick against Volkanovski at this point. I don't know. I just can't. He's proven time and time again that he's top dog, and I just don't know if Holloway has what it takes to regain that championship there.
Well, I'm sorry, Brent, but we're going to have to see this fight probably a fourth time. I'm picking Holloway. Holloway he looked good against Yair, his last fight. He didn't look, amazing or, next level of something we haven't seen from Holloway. But the performance he put on against Calvin Kattar was just phenomenal. And I think Holloway knows that he has to win this fight if he ever wants hope of getting that title back, unless Volkanovski was to lose it to someone else later down the line. So I think Holloway's going to come out there and he's going to really have to put a stamp on him and push the pace and really find his range, find his rhythm. And like you said, I agree. I think if Holloway is to win, it's going to be by a finish. And I think it needs to come early. And, second, third round tops. But on the flip side, with Volkanovski, one thing we saw new in the second fight compared to their first fight was, takedowns. He actually got a couple of takedowns in the second fight, and he utilized that. And we've seen that more recently with his fights against Korean Zombie and Brian Ortega. And Volkanovski's boxing has gotten better. It really has. Since their second fight, Volkanovski's boxing has gotten better. And I think the same can be said for Max Holloway. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight's very different from their first 2 encounters.
Yeah, I completely agree. For some reason in my head, I'm also backing Max Holloway. I don't really have a lot to back that up with, more to the point that I thought he won the second fight. I thought he won 3 rounds to 2, but it was a very close fight, so I can see how sometimes it would sway either way, depending on what the judge's preference is. Like if a judge prefers striking, they'd probably vote it Max Holloway, but if a bigger fan of grappling, they would probably give the fight to Volkanovski. And I completely understand that. But I just feel that Max Holloway is going to get the win. I just think his volume might be too much for Volkanovski this time. They know each other really well. Like this will be the 3rd time they've trained for each other. So it becomes more like you know what you're coming in with. And I think that might play in Max Holloway's favour as well. Like he knows Volkanovski, he knows what his boxing's like, he knows what his wrestling's like. Like Volkanovski mixes the two very well. Like he mixes strikes into grappling very well. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He's so impressive. He's like a wee tank. I don't know if you get them over there, but he's like a wee Staffy, like a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. He's like one of those kind of like wee dogs, like a wee pit bull sort of thing. Like just the way he is, he's just like quite short, stocky, and just absolutely jacked to the gills. So it'll be they both had very good fights since they fought each other. Like as you mentioned, like the absolute beating that Max Holloway put in Calvin Kattar, like that was borderline criminal. I don't know why that fight wasn't stopped. And then the Yair fight as well. Like Yair, he poses a different puzzle to most other guys in the UFC. Like his striking's really good, and he comes up with crazy shit. Like his knockout to Korean Zombie. Like that's just one example. It popped off the top of my head. So they both had 2 very good wins since. Like Volkanovski, his win against Brian Ortega was so impressive. I know he got caught in the guillotine and was it round 3 or 4? And he just slipped out of it, but that was probably the most adversity we've really seen for Volkanovski in a long time. But obviously, Brian Ortega's different level of jiu-jitsu. And then his fight against Korean Zombie, like the beating he put in Korean Zombie, was again borderline criminal. It was sad that fight was sad. It made me sad watching it. Like the way he just absolutely destroyed him with that jab. You're just like, fuck me, stop the fight, man. Let's stop this guy stop him dying for his own toughness sort of idea. So they both put the staple points that they are the 2 best guys in the division, so they can make the case for the 3rd fight. But like you were saying, if Volkanovski wins, which he can, I think it's a coin flip again. Like they're both so well matched. They both get kind of, as much as they both are very good strikers, their striking's different. Their grappling's different. Like Volkanovski's a very good offensive wrestler, where I think Max is very good defensively wrestling. Like his takedown defense is really good. The way he does it is really interesting. So it's a pick 'em fight either way. I was going to go Max Holloway via decision, but there seems to be I've got a weird bee in my bonnet about fucking judges at the moment, and I think they really need to fix the judging system. They need to get better judges. They need more judges. In my opinion, I got a lot of shit for saying this on Twitter the other day. I got absolutely rinsed about how the judging system's perfect, and it's the fighters that don't know what they're talking about. It's fighters that don't know what they're looking at, and you're just like, okay. But no, moving forward as well, it's such a good fight. But if Max Holloway can't get this win, I don't see the argument to make it a 4th time if Volkanovski's already beat him 3 times. No matter how controversial you think the second fight was, he's already got that other two victories. So I think the only way for Volkanovski, if he wins, is to go up, which pains me because I want to see him fight Cejudo. I want to see Cejudo become C4. I think he might genuinely need to fight Valentina Shevchenko. He might need to fight Hart, or he might need to fight Juliana Pena if she beats Amanda Nunes. But I want to see C4. I'd love to see that fight, but Volkanovski's already started to leave breadcrumbs that he's going up to 155 if he wins this fight, which I completely get. But he's not getting any younger. It gets harder to cut weight. before he was properly fighting, I think he weighed about 190 pounds, like something like that. When he was playing rugby, like he was a beefy boy, he was a big boy. So that cutting the weight is so hard. So I can understand how he wants that extra 10 pounds. It'll add, and it might make him even better. Who knows? He might be depleted at 145, which is an insane thought. But is there anything else you guys would like to add?
I would say that same thing for Holloway. If he was to lose this fight, he should move up to 55. You know, I don't see Holloway maybe winning the title at 55, but there's a lot of enticing matchups there that would be a treat to watch at 55. And plus, Max cuts a lot of weight too, so you know.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Max has already kind of teased it. Like he fought at 155. He fought Dustin, which was a great fight. Like that fight was fucking wild. It was just Max Holloway's durability was insane. He was like Homer Simpson in that fight, like the way he took those punches and he kind of wore out Dustin Poirier. I know Dustin Poirier ended up getting the win, but that fight kind of went either way, if I remember rightly. There was 2 strong rounds for Poirier at the beginning, and then the 2 rounds at the end were hugely in Holloway's favour. But then he'd put his hand forward to fight Khabib as well. I think that was after Tony Ferguson pulled out. So he's already kind of laid those seeds that he wants to move up to 155. And I think that'd be amazing for him. I think it would hurt me to see either of them leave the 145 division because they are so good. And they are obviously, but I think it would bring a breath of fresh air to the 145 division, and we would get to see what we've seen with the flyweight division. Let's see, when Demetrius Johnson left the flyweight division, everyone was going, oh, fuck, it's going to die. And there was that whole way where TJ was going to take the belt and then kill the division. That division's now became one of the fun ones in the UFC. Yeah. So it just shows that just this breath of fresh air, a couple of new stars in the world you're oyster, and we could see that at 145. Who knows? If they leave, we might see Meal Deal, Arnold Allen become a champion, like Josh Emmett. You've got Calvin Kattar as well. He had a super close fight with Josh Emmett. So them two maybe leaving the division could be the best thing for the division.
There's one last thing for me to add. And Martin, I can't believe you didn't mention it, but Conor McGregor versus Max Holloway 55. If Max was to lose the fight, that makes all the sense in the world. They've talked about it for years and years. You know, neither guy would have to cut substantial amount of weight, and it's the rematch, you know.
Yes, I would love to see that fight, purely because how the first fight went. Like the first fight was like a great grappling display for Conor McGregor. But I think he hurt his leg or something in that fight. But his grappling was so like he looked like a wrestler. It was fun. But see, looking back in that fight with all the shit that they talk about Conor McGregor's wrestling, it's quite humorous. But no, that fight. Aye, that would be one of the fights to make for me, and I think that is one of the fights that could entice Conor McGregor back to the UFC, because we want to see Conor McGregor in the UFC. I'm not into it. Like, I'm a big Conor McGregor fan, as probably everybody in the world knows. Just look at my Twitter. I'm always needing to defend him because he's an absolute tit. But I don't want to see. I don't want to see him fight Floyd Mayweather. Yes. My man, and I can see Brent's got him behind him as well. I'm actually kind of lacking here. I should have worn my t-shirt, but no, I don't want to see him fight Floyd Mayweather. The fight with Floyd Mayweather doesn't interest me. It interested me the first time because it was the mystique. Like, oh, could he do it? Could this guy come and knock out the best defensive boxer of all time? We've seen it. He didn't. I don't see it changing now. Like, I don't think Conor McGregor's striking's got levels better since. Which, if that makes sense, like the first fight was so interesting because it had the mystique, it had the build up, it had the hype, it had this but not undefeated, but he looked invincible. He had that aura of invincibility. He just absolutely ragdolled Jose Aldo. He ragdolled Eddie Alvarez back to back. He was a 2-weight world champion. Get into that fight with Floyd Mayweather. Now what was his last fight? He got beat off Dustin Poirier. He's been beat off Dustin Poirier twice. Hasn't won since he beat Donald Cerrone. The fight doesn't have the same pop And I think I always thought Floyd Mayweather was scheduled to fight that boy for Rising, but I digress. We'll move on to the main event, and this main event, it's for a lot of people it's quite cut and dry, but I find it very interesting. Like I think Jarred Cannonier really does have that kind of puncher's chance. Get into this. Like, this is a guy who's fought at heavyweight, he's fought at light heavyweight, and he's fought at middleweight as well. Like, got wins at all three divisions, so it is very interesting. And he is an absolute unit of a man. Like, what do you think, Brent? How do you see the Izzy and Jarred fight going?
I'm excited for this one. I'm excited for a few reasons. Mainly, what I'm excited for is to see what Cannonier has here. If he has anything for Izzy. I mean, we basically know what we're getting with Adesanya, which is 100% awesomeness. I mean, personal shit aside, if you're a fight fan, you can't not like watching this guy fight. Just about all his fights are exciting. That being said, Adesanya is the baddest man at middleweight, but honestly, in my opinion, Jarred Cannonier is the scariest man at middleweight. The power he possesses is freakish. And not only the power, he does have the speed behind him. Totally different style, obviously from Isreal. I don't know. As much as I would love Cannonier to come out and shake things up in the division and grab that belt from Izzy, I just don't see it happening. Adesanya has a confidence rarely seen in the sport, and as long as he has that confidence, I don't see a guy like Cannonier getting past him unless he catches him with that power. I mean, that's dead on. Where he definitely has a puncher's chance. I just don't see it. I'm picking Izzy to retain his belt here.
Yeah, I'm going the same way. I'm going with Adesanya, the champion, to retain. It's a very good fun fight in my opinion. And both guys, thinking you would see them and you would think, oh, Adesanya's for sure got the longer reach. He's the longer guy in there. But actually, Cannonier has a 78-inch reach, which is just 2 inches smaller than Adesanya's, and he's sneaky with it. So I think Cannonier's slower than Adesanya for sure. Adesanya lands more significant strikes. Actually, they land about the same, but he has a better defense rate than Cannonier. But for Cannonier to win this fight, he would have to just get into that range and get into the pocket with Adesanya, because that's one place Adesanya does not want to be, because what Cannonier reminds me of is a better Kelvin Gastelum. And we saw, that fight was a couple years back with Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. But I just feel like Cannonier's got more power. He's more explosive than Gastelum. But yeah, I'm going with Adesanya. I think he's going to dictate the pace. I think he's not going to let Cannonier back him up against the cage and cut off the octagon for him. And I see Adesanya finishing him. I see it being a third or fourth round stoppage for Adesanya.
I'm the same. I'm siding with you guys, and I think this is the first time tonight we've had this clean sweep of we're all backing the same guy. But I'm going with Izzy as well. Just I think Jarred Cannonier, he does possess unnatural power, a lot of unreal power, but I don't think it's anything Izzy hasn't seen before. I mean, Izzy has fought big explosive guys in the past. Like he fought, like the way he handled Paulo Costa, like you can't really you can't overstep for a minute, you can't overreach for a minute. Where's your Adesanya? Because he's striking so clean, his defensiveness is so good, and his counter striking so clean. Like if you overcommit on one punch, he'll hit you a 3-piece and a soda and usually put you on your back. It's very difficult. It seems like it's completely like people, like guys watch him fight. Like they'll watch Isreal Adesanya fight and go, this is what I would do in that situation. But it seems that the puzzle looks completely different when you're in there compared to when you're watching it on telly. Like the way he moves, the way he utilises his feet, the way he utilises his range, the way he's in and out of the pocket, which it's very interesting as well that Jarred Cannonier's fought at heavyweight, that he's used to fighting bigger guys, because although Izzy does have like a couple inch reach advantage, he's got 6 inches in height over Cannonier as well, which is huge. Like especially with somebody like Izzy that likes to utilise a lot of kicks, like being able to use that kind of range better, like your kicking range a lot better. But that's a big difference maker. But that again, that's nothing that Cannonier hasn't seen before. And I'm quite interested to see if Cannonier looks to utilise wrestling, because like, I don't think Izzy's wrestling's bad. Like, I think he's really good defensively wrestling. I think maybe the Jan Blachowicz fight was more weight behind it rather than like when he was able to get him down. The way he was able to hold him down was because Jan Blachowicz on the night was probably about 230 pounds and Isreal Adesanya was 204 pounds sort of idea. So a lot of that's been made about Isreal Adesanya, that he can't wrestle because the way the Blachowicz fight went. And I want to see if like Jarred Cannonier buys into that, and if Jarred Cannonier looks to try and exploit that in his mind, or if he'll look to play the striking game. But it's very difficult with Isreal Adesanya to strike with him because he's so elite, and it's very difficult to get a training partner who replicates the kind of puzzle that Isreal presents on the night. So that's what's just making me go with Isreal Adesanya, because I just think his striking would be too much, his counter striking will be too much, and his elusive movement will bait Jarred Cannonier into making mistakes which he'll counter on. I think the only Isreal Adesanya fight that I've watched that I haven't been completely invested in, not invested, that's the wrong word, but completely enjoyed watching at times, was maybe the Yoel Romero fight. But then again, that's because he's fighting Yoel fucking Romero, and you need to be on it with that man, because even when you watch him in Bellator, like he's 40 years of age, and he's still knocking motherfuckers out the way he is. Like his power is so insane, and if the way you can beat that man is by staying at distance, utilizing your range, kicking his leg, using jabs, and you get out of that fight alive, yes, you would take that any day of the week, because he's one of the most difficult guys to compete with in mixed martial arts, as Yoel Romero, because it's just the power, it's the raw power he represents. He's like does remind me a lot of Jarred Cannonier, so I wonder if Isreal will take that kind of same approach. But is there anything else you guys would like to add about the fight?
Oh yeah, I'd just like to add that I think we see a lot of times with Adesanya's opponents, when they do get him pinned up against the cage and they try to cut off the octagon from him escaping, they get kind of frozen in the moment, because Adesanya is very flashy, he moves a lot, and they just kind of get lulled to sleep, almost standing there. Next thing you know, Adesanya's done circled out and he's completely gone again. And I don't think Cannonier is going to allow it. I will say that I think Cannonier, when he gets him there, he's going to pounce, because that's the fighting style of Cannonier, and he's so dangerous. I think he'll be willing to go in there and eat a shot to give a shot. But on the flip side, that's another reason why I'm going with Adesanya. I know he's the better counter striker, and I just feel like Cannonier will have his moments, but eventually Adesanya is going to catch him coming in.
Is there anything else you want to add, Brent, about this fight or about the card as a whole?
No, other than I can't wait. I mean, I hope this week flies by, and because top to bottom, I mean, there's a couple of fights that we didn't even get to touch on in the prelims, just time restrictions. But this thing is so stacked. I don't know. I'm excited to see what happens here with all these close matchups. The trilogy fight, it doesn't get any better than this, man. Hot summer Saturday, July night, wicked fights. Can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've summarised that perfectly there, Brent. I think it will be an amazing night of fights. So if that's everything, we can just wrap it up there. And thanks very much for listening, guys. I'm a bit unsure here. Is it Tom that stops?
That's
Or
I'm waiting. I'm like, are we
should be
done?
Tom. I guess we
Aye,
can
let's-
all just leave, but I don't know how that works.
I mean, surely Tom's listening in. Maybe not. Maybe he's taking a smoke break.
he was too engaged with listening to us. He's dozed off in the car. I think there has actually been a few people listening live, to be honest with you, because I've seen some comments popping up. Someone mentioned something about pearls, like a necklace. I was just like, I was kind of like, Cinderella soul. He can't feed his family. Well, is he wearing pearls?
My buddy's watching in, and he just sent me a text. He said that shit got awkward as hell at the end.
It did. It get very awkward. Like, it's the only way I can describe it is when you're having a one night stand and you kind of nut and you just look into each other like, what the fuck have we both done? But let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
Aye. What kind of hot beverages do you provide? Aye. I'm unsure what happens if we all leave. Like, hopefully there is a way we can cut this out from YouTube, because I kind of want to see us get monetized, and I don't think we'll get monetized with that last wee part that I said. Oh, we're gone.